Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the sources you've shared and really pull out the crucial knowledge you need. No fluff, just the important bits.
Right.
You're here to get informed quickly, thoroughly, and that's exactly what we're aiming for today. We're diving straight into Sammy Franco's book, First Strike, End a Fight in 10 Seconds or Less.
Yeah.
You wanted to understand this idea, the preemptive strike in self-defense, so that's our mission.
Yeah.
Unpack what it means, why Franco pushes for it, and some of the first things he says you really need to consider.
Yeah. And what's striking, pardon the pun, about this book right away is its foundation. It's what Franco calls contemporary fighting arts, or CFA.
CFA, okay.
Yeah. And you got to forget, like, the traditional martial arts image, this is purely focused on real-world street encounters. The book makes it clear no belts, no forms, just practical survival skills.
So very practical.
Very. It blends ideas from all over: police and military tactics, criminal psychology, how fear works, aggression, even human anatomy under stress. It's all geared towards, staying safe when things get dangerous.
Okay, so let's get right to the core of it then, this first strike principle. What exactly is it, according to Franco, and why the big emphasis on getting that first move in?
Well, simply put, the first strike principle is about initiating force against someone posing a clear threat. The goal: neutralize them immediately, stop them from attacking you effectively.
Right.
The logic is pretty stark, but, in a real fight, it makes sense. The longer it drags on, the higher your risk. Serious injury, even death. Striking first is about grabbing that initiative to minimize the danger right from the start.
So it's really about ending things fast, taking control immediately.
Precisely. Franco really hammers home how crucial surprise is. By launching that first strike, you can catch an aggressor totally off guard, mess up their plan, and put them on the back foot instantly. Think about it, he points out. A lot of street fights are over very quickly, often because of that first decisive action. That's the basic idea.
Now, he's careful, you mentioned, to distinguish this from something he calls a single attack methodology. What's the difference there? Why is that important?
Yeah, that's a really key distinction he makes. Franco doesn't buy into the idea that one perfect move ends every fight. That's movie stuff, right?
Right, like a knockout punch fantasy.
Exactly. He argues that in the chaos of a real street situation, just banking on one tentative strike is way too risky. You need to be ready to fully commit using a rapid effect sequence of actions, not just, hoping one punch does the job.
So it sounds like he's strongly against holding back or just sort of testing the waters.
Definitely. He directly challenges that traditional martial arts idea of waiting for the other person to move first.
Which is what a lot of people are taught.
It is. But Franco says on the street that reactive approach can be disastrous. He points out that many people hesitate to strike first, maybe because they don't know how or they're unsure about the legal side. And that hesitation, that's where you get hurt.
That brings us to the really critical question, doesn't it?
Right.
When is a first strike actually justified? That feels like the absolute crux of this.
It absolutely is, and Franco acknowledges it. Figuring out when it's justified is the toughest part of this whole principle. He lays down a fundamental rule: you should never use force unless it's absolutely necessary. Then he breaks down the levels: lethal force stuff, capable of causing serious injury or death, and non-lethal force, which isn't.
And even if you genuinely believe you are justified,
Yeah.
there can still be consequences, right? He mentions that.
Precisely. Franco is very upfront about the risks. Even in what seems like clear self-defense, you could still face a civil lawsuit. Anyone can sue anyone, essentially.
Yeah.
And a criminal complaint is also possible. Whether charges are pressed is up to the authorities, but the risk is there. And what's really interesting is his point about people with formal training.
Oh, yeah, you meant
They
this.
might actually be held to a higher standard of behavior legally.
That seems so counterintuitive, doesn't it? You train to be better at defending yourself, but the training itself could be used against you.
It does seem that way. The idea is the more skilled you're perceived to be, the greater the expectation you'd use those skills responsibly, only as a true last resort. Franco really stresses a first strike is only for protecting yourself or others from unlawful injury or the immediate threat of it, and only after you've exhausted all other ways to avoid the violence.
Okay, so it's truly a last resort, even though it's the first strike.
Exactly. The first refers to the physical action, not the sequence of events leading up to it.
Got it. So if you sense a threat brewing, how do you actually assess that situation to decide if a first strike might be justified?
Right, the assessment piece. Franco emphasizes needing a rapid but accurate evaluation. He breaks it down into two main areas: the environment you're in, and the person who might be the threat. Let's start with the environment.
Okay, the environment. What specific things does he say to look out for?
Well, attacks can happen anywhere, right? So you need to quickly size up the strategic angles of your immediate surroundings. He lists 6 key factors.
6, okay.
Barriers, anything blocking an attacker or giving you cover. Escape routes, clear paths to get away safely. Footing the ground condition, slippery, uneven, whatever.
Yeah.
Lighting, how well can you actually see? Space, room to move, to maneuver. And finally, makeshift weapons.
Makeshift weapons. That's interesting to think about on the fly. What kind of things does he mean?
He categorizes them. Striking weapons like a heavy keychain, maybe a sturdy umbrella. Distracting items, something you could throw to divert attention for a second. Shielding objects, anything to offer some protection. Even potential cutting tools, depending on what's around.
Wow.
The key is awareness. Seeing the potential in everyday items, not just their normal use. So it's not just noticing, oh, there's a wall. It's thinking strategically, how can I use that wall? Where's my escape route before anything starts? It's proactive awareness.
Right, so it's not just about the person, but really using your surroundings strategically.
Right.
Okay, what about assessing the potential adversary themselves? What are the critical things there?
Okay, assessing the person. Franco says you need to figure out who they are, stranger, someone you know, alone, with others. And what are their intentions, best you can tell? He identifies 5 essential factors to consider.
5 for the adversary. Okay, what are they?
Demeanor, intent, range, positioning, and weapon capability.
Let's break those down. Demeanor, what kind of clues are we looking for?
Demeanor is their outward behavior, verbal and nonverbal. Are they visibly agitated? Shaking, maybe? Clenched fists? Breathing fast? What are they saying? Aggressive language? Direct threats? Are they slurring? Maybe incoherent?
So watching and listening closely.
Very closely. Tone of voice, posture, any signs of intense emotion, anger, frustration, maybe being under the influence. These are all potential early warnings about their intent.
And intent, you said, is crucial, but can be the hardest to really pin down accurately.
Exactly. Why are they confronting you? Is it a robbery? Are they trying to intimidate you, hurt you? Just harassment? Or are they actively looking for a fight? Figuring out their motivation as best you can in that moment helps gauge the immediate danger level.
Then there's range, the physical distance. How does that factor in?
Range dictates the immediate threat type. Unarmed. Franco talks about kicking range, punching range, grappling range. Are they close enough to hit you, far enough to kick, trying to close in to grab you? And if they have a weapon, knife, pipe, whatever you immediately need to judge their reach with that, is that distance shrinking fast?
Positioning seems related, but broader, like where everyone is in the space.
Correct. It's the spatial relationship and context. Where are you and the adversary relative to hazards, advantages, escape routes, potential targets on them? Are they blocking your exit? Are they near something they could grab as a weapon? Are there multiple people trying to surround you? Do they have cover?
Lots to process quickly.
Yeah.
And the last one was weapon capability, armed or not.
Yeah, critical assessment. Are they armed? What kind of weapon? Do they look like they know how to use it? Could they have more than one hidden? Franco suggests looking at 4 things.
Okay.
Hands and fingers clutching something. One hand hidden. Their overall behavior padding pockets or waistband. Acting super nervous. Reaching movements. Their clothing, bulky jacket, something clipped on a belt. And their location, are they suspiciously close to an object they could easily weaponize?
He also throws in a really important warning about not stereotyping people based on looks.
Absolutely. Crucial point. Franco warns against relying on preconceived ideas of what a dangerous person looks like. He gives the example, you might expect some kind of stereotypical thug, but end up facing someone who looks totally average, unassuming.
Right.
You have to assess based on actual behavior, the specific circumstances, not harmful stereotypes. That's key to acting decisively but appropriately.
Okay, so before we even get to the physical skills, he really emphasizes resolving your own moral and ethical issues before you're ever in that situation. Why is that so vital for the first strike idea?
Franco argues that internal conflict, like a mixed-up moral compass, is a massive liability in a high-stress encounter. If you hesitate because you're wrestling with your beliefs about using force, even justifiably, that hesitation can be fatal. He specifically tackles common misinterpretations like religious teachings about turning the other cheek or thou shalt not kill. He clarifies the latter is more accurately thou shalt not murder, implying the unjustified taking of life.
So he's drawing a line between unlawful killing and necessary force for self-preservation.
Precisely. He stresses the goal in using potentially lethal force in self-defense is to stop the immediate threat of serious harm or death. It's not necessarily about intending to kill the
But
attacker.
the possibility exists.
Yes, and he's realistic about that. The possibility that the attacker might die as a result of your justified actions shouldn't stop you from acting decisively to protect yourself or others. His point is, when the situation warrants it, and it's legally justified, using even deadly force for self-protection is morally permissible in his framework.
And he's very clear, isn't he, that this whole proactive mindset, being willing to strike first legitimately, it's just not going to be right for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. He really stresses that initiating a first strike needs a specific psychological and emotional readiness. If you have deep moral objections, or if your conscience just screams no at the idea of preemptive action, even when clearly threatened, then he basically advises against trying to adopt this. Your own hesitation becomes the biggest danger.
Right, you'd be working against yourself. Okay, finally, he starts to touch on some initial prerequisites, the foundational skills someone would need to even think about using the first strike principle effectively. What are the first few he introduces?
He actually outlines 11 prerequisites in the book, but the first three he mentions are 1. Range proficiency, being able to fight effectively at different distances, kicking, punching, grappling.
Okay, different ranges.
2. Stances, specifically understanding and using both a first strike stance, sort of a ready position, and a general fighting stance. And 3. Mobility, being able to move your body quickly, efficiently, to create openings, close distance, or, get away. He does say these get explored in much more detail later in the book.
So hinting at more practical stuff to come.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try and summarize this initial deep dive into Sammy Franco's first strike principle. It's about taking decisive preemptive action.
Right. To neutralize a threat quickly.
But only when absolutely justified.
Yeah.
That justification comes from a really careful, rapid assessment of both your environment and the potential adversary.
Spot on. And it's also critical, as we discussed, to have already sorted out your own moral framework regarding this beforehand.
And then beginning to develop those foundational skills you mentioned, range control, stances, mobility.
Yeah, that's a really solid recap. Franco offers a very direct, reality-based approach. It prioritizes taking the initiative when facing danger, which is, quite different from a lot of traditional, more reactive self-defense thinking.
And those initial prerequisites really underline that this first strike idea isn't just like a concept. It demands actual skill and a high level of awareness.
Exactly. It's not just deciding, I'm going to hit first. It's a principle that requires serious commitment to training and a clear-eyed understanding of the very real, potentially severe consequences of any physical fight.
Okay, thinking about all this.
Yeah.
The complexities of assessing a threat so quickly, under pressure, and then the emphasis on immediate, decisive action. What single factor do you think would be the most challenging part for someone to truly master if they were considering this first strike principle in the real world?
That's a really thoughtful question. While the physical techniques themselves, you can learn them, you can practice them, I'd argue that consistently and accurately judging the true level of threat in a chaotic, high-stress moment,
Yeah.
and then overcoming the natural psychological hurdles to initiating a potentially violent act, even when it is self-defense, that combination would likely be the biggest, most ongoing challenge for most people.
Definitely gives you something to mull over. Well, if this deep dive into the first strike principle has caught your interest, we absolutely encourage you to check out Sammy Franco's book, First Strike and a Fight in 10 Seconds or Less. You can dig into those other prerequisites, the specific techniques, the scenarios he lays out.
Yeah, there's a lot more detail in there.
We'd love to hear your thoughts too, or any further questions this discussion sparked. Maybe in future deep dives, we could look at specific CFA techniques or dive deeper into the mental game Franco emphasizes. Thanks for joining us for this pretty intense exploration.